Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Kerr. I'm a curator here in the Department of Film, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's program. This is the first in a new partnership we have with the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, and we're very grateful. Particularly to Patrick Harrison, who's with us today, and to Randy Haberkamp, who runs the Academy Film Archive, that did such an amazing job of restoring the work print of Thief and the Cobbler. Appropriately for a program co-sponsored by the Academy, we have all Academy Award winners on stage today. John Canemaker is a winner of the Oscar for the Best Animated Short for his film The Moon in the Sun. He is professor at NYU and used to getting his own way. So it's author of many, many books, including one on Richard Williams, and his show on the making of Disney's, it is Pinocchio, is currently at the Disney Museum in San Francisco. So please welcome John Canemaker.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It is an enormous honor and pleasure for me to join with the great Richard Williams in an animated conversation. In 1955, when Richard was 22 years old, he had an epiphany on the island of Ibiza. His amazing draftsmanship on commercial jobs in Canada helped him to finance his education at the Ontario College of Art, where his drawing ability was, as a classmate put it, the envy of the entire school. Those commercial art jobs also allowed him to take 2 years off to paint seriously in Ibiza. Richard loved Disney animation, and as a teenager, he crashed the studio in California 3 times. But his interest in cartoon animation waned, he said, after the impact of seeing in a Toronto art gallery the paintings of Rembrandt. Now, on an island off the sun-kissed coast of Spain, he suddenly realized all the possibilities in the medium of animation, including a modern 20th century application of classical painting and drawing techniques. His idyllic sojourn inspired his first animated short in 1958, The Little Island, an allegory about truth, beauty, and good all living together on a desert isle. "That's it," he said, looking at his preliminary sketches for the film. "I saw the medium that combined everything I was interested in." He hatched a master plan for himself. "I decided," he said, "to become the very best on the commercial side and then master the techniques of the art of personality animation. I wanted it all." Richard proceeded to London to begin his remarkable career and indeed to have it all. When I first met him in 1974 at a New York Animation Film Festival, Richard Williams was by then recognized as one of the finest animators and directors of his generation. His short personal films, his movie titles and linking sequences, and television commercials were renowned for their artistry and sophisticated content, wit, and technical brilliance, and they garnered him awards galore. Now he was not just the envy of the Ontario School of Art, but the entire world of animation. He won the first of 3 Oscars for a 26-minute version of Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Phase 2 of his master plan was working because he said we had developed the ability to develop Scrooge as a personality. How he accomplished this was by literally going back to school. Dissatisfied with what he called the graphic tricks of his earlier work, and dazzled by animator Milt Kahl's Tiger and Walt Disney's 1967 feature, The Jungle Book, Richard decided to learn the art and craft of character animation directly from master animators who had perfected the art during the golden age of the Hollywood cartoon in the 1930s and 40s. So he began to import these elder masters to London. Some of them lectured, such as Milt Kahl, Frank Thomas, John Hubley, Chuck Jones, and Ollie Johnston. Others, including Grim Natwick, Art Babbitt, and Ken Harris, worked with Richard on his film projects, including his magnum opus, The Thief and the Cobbler. His busy studio, located in an emerald green building at 13 Soho Square, London, became as magical an address to animators as Disney's 2719 Hyperion Avenue, Hollywood. Copies of lectures by the master animators were passed around the world as if they were Galileo's notes on motion. Janet Flanner, the New Yorker writer, once advised a journalist to visit aging celebrities and interview them. Tax their brains, she told him. It's like lobsters. Go for the head. There's tasty chewing there. Richard Williams intuitively followed Ms. Flanner's advice. He sought informational sustenance and inspiration from key pioneers of personality animation. And thanks to Richard, their precise information and precious information lives on in his films and in the Animator's Survival Kit, Richard's definitive book, DVD, and app, an indispensable source of animation knowledge. Are there any animators in the house? Those of us who saw Richard Williams' masterclass presentations in person will never forget them. For he is not only a master animator and director, he has become a master teacher and historian as well, a Giorgio Vasari for our time. Richard Williams is now himself a tasty lobster. He celebrated his 83rd birthday in March by animating the next phase of his independent feature, a portion of which, titled Prologue, was nominated for yet another Oscar. This afternoon, we will chew on his brilliant career, everything from The Little Island through Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Prologue. And of course, we will talk about his now legendary film, The Thief and the Cobbler, A Moment in Time. Dizzy Gillespie once called Louis Armstrong jazz in person. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here comes animation in person. Please welcome the one, the only, Richard Williams.
You take me on?
Well,
How can I follow that?
you better. Welcome back to New York. Welcome back to MoMA. We're all so happy to have you here.
I've known John for
Ever.
ever. He knows the dark side as well.
Oh, no. There is no dark side. No. We were in this very same space 8 years ago, and within 2 days of each other, it's almost right on the date. And at that time, Richard had a list of films, and he said, "Here's this number 8," and it was called a Surprise. And it turned out to be a 35 millimeter CinemaScope print, 5 minutes long, of The Thief and the Cobbler. Now we're here 8 years later, and you're having 7 showings of the entire cut that you brought with you. It's been reviewed in the New York Times. Did you see the review Thursday in the New York Times? Fantastic review. Here's the money quote. It says, though several distinctive animated movies have been released this year, The Thief and the Cobbler, even in its sadly incomplete state, leaves them in the dust. So that was his review. So you've won, Richard, after all the trouble that you've had with the film, and it's been restored by the Academy. I mean, are you happy Are you satisfied?
Yes. Yeah, I think,
Because you went through hell for a while.
yeah.
You worked how long on the film originally? About 30 years?
No, it's 20 years before we got the finishing money. So then another 2, I think.
Yeah.
So it was a blow, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I think when you have I kept thinking of a general. If you have a defeat like that, get off the battlefield. So my wife and I, Imogen, we went to an island in Canada for 5 years. And I thought, there's where I started the book. And I sort of, because I left Canada when I was 20, I snapped back into student mode. And so I started really studying. I did a ton of life drawing, and I became a student. And I thought, I have nothing to do with the business. Everything I do now, I'm going to do has nothing to do with the business. And if it has, I mean, whatever happens to it, that's what happens to it. That was the best thing I ever did. And I got very angry about I was told, you know, the thing about the glass of water, you mustn't feel sad, you know, just the glass of water, is it full or empty or half?
Yeah.
And I realized that guy was right. It is the best thing. So I went back to school at age, whatever I was. 60? 60. Yeah. So I really did. And I got muscles again. And then I'm happy. I'd advise anybody to do it, actually.
Well, we're so glad that the film was preserved as it is. I mean, watching The Thief and the Cobbler in this particular state is like a lesson in animation process. It's great to see it, you know, with the completed scenes. It's also great to see it as a pencil test, layouts, all of that. It's really, I think it's a beautiful thing the way it is, as it is now. How was that?
Droopy.
Yeah.
My favorite cartoon character is Droopy, and they got me to do the voice of Droopy in the Roger Rabbit. Yeah. So all I can say is, you know what? I'm happy.
Good. I think I'd like to introduce somebody very special in the audience who had a lot to do with the reason the film is here. She is a gifted director of documentaries. She is a novelist. She is the producer of The Thief and the Cobbler and the producer of the Animator Survival Kit and all of its manifestations. She's an Academy Award nominated and a very new member of the Academy itself, and she happens to be Richard's wife and muse. Please welcome Imogen Sutton.
Great.
I'd like to go forward by going backward. Where did your talent for art come from, Richard?
Oh, my mother, definitely. She was a natural.
What kind of art did she do?
Illustration, but she was the oldest of 6 children. And she won she and another girl tied for a huge music scholarship in Canada. She played violin and piano. And her dad said, well, you'll never make any money at that, and stopped her playing. And they discovered she could make money at commercial art. Well, the stuff she did when she was 16 and 17 was wonderful. I mean, sort of Arthur Rackham or Edmund Dulac-ish.
Wow.
But then, after you animate babies, she did the Heinz baby ads in the 30s or whatever. How many drawings do you have to do of a woman at the stove you know, and she was kind of exploited by her two husbands. And it just, she's still a terrific person, a terrific character, but it's pity she, you know, it's terrible in those days.
But did you
for a
watch her
woman.
work? Is that how it was sort of
Oh, yeah.
passed on
Yeah.
to you?
She was, she's a terrific person,
Yeah.
wasn't she? I mean, very unusual person.
And where did you get your drive from, your competitiveness, your taking on impossible tasks, the hard work that you put into the animation that you do? Where did that come from?
I don't know. Well, I saw, I blamed her. I said, I was attacking her for saying, why am I driven? You know, it's because you had all this talent, and I don't think I have as much as you do, but I work all the time on it. And I said, it's you've done this to me. You've driven me into this. And she said, rubbish. She said, when you were 5 years old when you saw Snow White, and you were never the same again. And I think that's true, because I saw Snow White at 5, then it was sort of almost the next year Pinocchio. Fantasia, and Dumbo, and Bambi.
Yeah.
And
That'll do it.
yeah, that did it.
Yeah.
That did it. It still does it.
Speaking of
Dumbo is a great work. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Disney, tell us how you got into the Disney studio, and didn't they kind of use you for publicity? You became the world's greatest Disney fan or something?
Yeah, they did a story on. I saved up. I was making money early. I was always able to earn money, and I saved up my money. I was 15, and I got on a bus to California, 5 days and 4 nights or whatever it was. And I got into the YMCA, and I tried to get into the Disney studio, and I used to walk up and down the fence, and couldn't get in. Somehow, which I can't remember, I got on a tour. And when our parents died, my brother found my letters home. There are 3 letters from the Y. And I got in with a bunch of ladies who looked like Pekinese or whatever. And I met a few of the people and kept trying to escape from the party. And I did, to some extent.
Yeah.
But then my mom, Disney was interested in her. And there was some talk of her going to, and she didn't leave Toronto. Anyway, she had a friend who was an art director, advertising art creative director. And she said, go and see Charlie. So I went and saw Charlie for dinner, and I took all my artwork. And he said, good heavens, you're a prodigy. I said, there's a story here. So he said, I'm going to ring up the head of publicity at Disney. And so he did, and I got into Disney. And they did, can you imagine, 15 years old? And
What year was this?
I met.
What year would this have been? The mid-50s, right? What
Well,
film were they working on?
48.
48.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
We see some pictures in this documentary. There's some shots, 4 shots that they did of me at Disney. And they did, I knew so much about the, oh, that's right. When I got in the first tour, I escaped from it. And I grabbed one of the directors, Nick Nichols, and he was I knew so much about everybody because I was a ferret. And, you know, he was terribly impressed with this kid, you see. And so I spent hours, and I spoiled, he was trying to go on a holiday, and I used up his day's work. And then he had to work into the night. And his secretary gave me a lift home to the Y. But then the next time I got the full treatment, and I had no memory of it's in a letter. I was meeting, somehow, I don't know how I met Ronald Reagan when he was a B movie actor.
At the Disney studio?
I'm not sure, but
Did you meet Walt Disney?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I didn't remember. I didn't read Disney, you see. But I met Ward Kimball, the marvelous animator, and the Firehouse 5 was playing there, practicing in the lunch hour, and I met several marvelous
Not
guys.
call yet. Your idol.
No. And I thought, because I wasn't interested in Disney, you see, because he didn't draw. I thought, he's this. So
Didn't you observe?
anyway,
him,
the letter came in.
didn't you observe Walt?
This was later.
Oh, later.
The letter came in, and to my folks, and I read. It came in from my brother, and there it is. I met Walt Disney with Bing Crosby, and they were working on the
Ichabod and
Ichabod.
Mr. Toad. Yeah.
And
What was he doing?
I showed him my work, and he was impressed.
Huh.
It says in the letter, and I thought, I don't remember this. How come I don't remember this? And then I do remember it.
Yeah.
He was in a jersey. I remember Bing Crosby there and Walt there and me drawing. And he said, "Yeah, very impressive." And they shipped me back into the animators. So it made a tremendous impression. Yeah. And I wrote my mom said, because they were saying it's just a factory, and I said it's not a factory. And you get paid this for doing it, and if you're really good, and I said, I'm going to have to get really good, because these guys are really good.
What did Dick Kelsey tell you that was
Oh,
good
yeah,
advice?
this was very important. He did the drip, 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 little raindrops.
Yes. He was a concept artist.
Yeah, and very good, very good. He was doing, working on a Hiawatha with very, there'll be a picture of that, I think. And I said to him, I want to be this animator, and what should I do? What should I do? Because he drew very well. And he said, learn to draw. And I said, yes, but look. And he said, no. He said, put it away. I said, you could be an animator later. Take it up later if you want. But first, really learn to draw. Oh, okay. So I remember phoning him from the phone booth when I was getting on the bus back to Toronto and saying, what should I do? What should I do? And he said, I told you what to do. Learn to draw. Really learn to draw. Yes, thank you very much. And almost right away, for some reason, when back in Toronto, I went into the art gallery, probably by mistake, and there was a room full of Rembrandts, and I burst into tears, and I said, oh, that's what art is. I see, that's why they have beards and berets and all this stuff. It's the real thing, or trying to be the real thing.
What was it that impressed you? Was it the emotion that he got
Oh,
into
yeah,
the...
everything.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and
So
I
you
thought, gee, if you do animation, you could never get that quality into animation. But I kept, it's at the back of my mind, I thought, well, you can get quite a bit of it in there. And so I've been working on that all the time.
I would say Prologue.
Try to take it away from just cartoons.
Yeah, well, Prologue, I think, is a good example.
Yes,
of
which I'm not ashamed of the Prologue.
That's your favorite film?
It's the only one I'm not ashamed of. Really. There are bits and pieces, but I always see what's wrong with it,
So, Richard, you went to Ibiza, and then you came to London because you had this idea for the Little Island.
Yeah.
The style of the Little Island and the subsequent films like Love Me was this sort of mid-century modernist look. Were you enamored of UPA as well as Disney?
Absolutely. Rudy Toot Toot. Do you know Rudy Toot Toot? That kid. And Art Babbitt had animated the
That's right.
court scene with the lawyer and the
dancer
and
yeah.
Frankie on point, all on twos. Marvelous. And I knew John Hubley later, but I didn't realize that he was the director. Otherwise, I should have shined his shoes much better than I did.
Why? Here's what I wonder: is why did you choose to go to London instead of coming to America to do
Yeah.
your films as an independent? Because you liked Disney, and certainly there was a work
Well,
here at commercials and stuff. Why did you choose London?
You know, when you're young, you're arrogant. And I thought the Disney thing, it's corny, you know, and sentimental and da-da-da-da. And I thought the UPA was the way to go. And then I think I just sort of grew out of that.
Would it also have been because George Dunning, a fellow Canadian, was running UPA in London, and was there a connection?
He was a director.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I was their trace and paint girl. I was starved the first year in London, pretty much. I mean, really, oranges and milk and fish and chips for a year. And I couldn't get, the English won't let you in, you know. I'm staying here long. I got help from guys, but they wouldn't give, I said, I can do the work, I can do the work. I was a spoiled fellow because in Canada, I could easily earn money. I couldn't earn any in England. I can do the job, I can do the job. And no, we're fine. But after a year, then in came the Americans. So I had done work for George's company in Toronto, while going through school. And I knew him well. And I took a bit of my film, well, I'll leave that for, I couldn't afford the money to buy the paint, you know, that you put on the cells. And even the Disney paint popped off of the cells in time. And there is sort of a turpentine base or something. I happen to know from my painting thing about polyvinyl acetate, which you could paint. It was a tough binder. And I actually carried a bottle, a great big sort of quart bottle of polyvinyl acetate, white fluid. I said, wait a minute, I can't afford the paint, but if I get designer's colors, I can mix them with this polyvinyl, and I'll bet you that goes on. So it did. I tested it out. I went to one of the English guys, a nice guy, and we tested it. I said, look, hit it with a hammer, and you can get any colors, you see. And I thought, God, the thing to do is go into business, because that's better than anything Disney has.
So you set up your own studio there.
Yeah, but I didn't do I thought, I can't be bothered with business. You know, and I thought, it took 10 years before Cartoon Color turned it into an industry and did it properly. But I tried to get an English guy to do it, market it. Anyway, I got in as trace and paint. I was their trace and paint girl. And I painted the layers. You know how you had to compensate the layers when you're using different layers of cell and stuff. And I did it all very well. And then I took in to a guy called Leo Salkin, who worked out, he was the head of UPA in London, and George was the director. And I showed bits of the little island to Leo, and he wasn't interested at all. And it was fairly good stuff. And then I did a really bad commercial for Bob Godfrey, in which the screen was the face with dots for eyes, you know, a very crude thing, so the TV head was talking. And Leo told me, he said, did Dick do that? Oh, he's an animator. So I got hired as an animator. And then in 6 months I was a director. And then UPA closed because they spent too much on their studio and so in Grosvenor Square. It's ridiculous. And then George went off on his own with the financier from that. And I used to freelance for them.
He later directed The Yellow Submarine.
Yes, he's known for that.
But then you opened your own studio because you couldn't get work out other place.
Well, I used to do all tons of stuff for George. And one time, and I was getting fed up with animation again and painting. And he called me and he said, look, I'm in trouble. We need you in to design everything and do these storyboards and stuff. I used to do very elaborate storyboards. And I said, okay, I'll do 3 months, but no more. so, because he said we're not doing, the work isn't so good, and because none of us knew very much in those days, you know, especially in England. And so anyway, I did 3 months hard work, and I animated one thing which won an award and everything. At the end of the 3 months, I went up to George and said, well, I'm done now. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you know, you got me in for 3 months to try and pump the stuff up. And he said, oh, did I? I was friends with George. I said, I'm going across the road, George.
And open up
He did apologize later,
Yeah.
but that's because he was scared, because I did well immediately. So,
But then you did a lot of commercials, and one of the important films that you worked on was The Charge of the Light Brigade.
yeah.
And it was these, was it 18th century engravings
Illustrations,
that
engravings.
moved? Yeah. And you developed some kind of a system of cross-dissolving them.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about what that's like? We're going to see a clip.
Well, you know how for those of you who aren't animators, you know, when I used to love Westerns, and I never knew why. And then I realized it's because they have the long fade to the sunset, you know, or a long, slow dissolve. So these dissolves, you can use them in animation. People would, I don't know, for effect on certain things, maybe a third of a second dissolve on something. And I think I'd seen somebody do 4-frame dissolves.
2 in, 2 out.
Yes.
Crossing.
Yes.
So it's 4 frames total.
Yes. Well,
We're-
4 frames out and 4 frames in,
I
over
think-
top of it.
I think
What,
Mo's
if you
giving
think-
us a look because we're getting too geeky here.
Well,
Sorry about that.
anyway, on this Light Brigade, I had to, if you imagine, I had to animate these things from the Illustrated London News or things inspired by that. And I realized if I could have a scene of people walking around in the foreground, and then I could have the light moving on on trees, and that might. And I just said, do it like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, you take this, and that jigsaw bit is on 1 foot dissolves, or a third of it, 2/3 of a second. The people I'm going to make on they're little ones. I'll make them on 4-frame dissolves, and then maybe the moon is coming in, and that's a 3-second dissolve or something. So I divided it all up into little things and did it, and it worked like crazy.
Yeah. Did you once tell me that you were inspired by Bambi in terms of cross dissolves?
Yes, when Bambi's in love with the sort of dance in the moonlight with the two.
The grass, sort of.
The grass, and I remember the grass goes like that.
Yeah.
You'll see an echo of that in my prologue thing, not done as well. But it struck me. Anyway, I kept trying to get the cameraman to do, the only way he could do dissolves was to stand on the
Careful.
chair and move the shutter like this.
That's good.
So of course,
Yes.
of course. So, so I got him down to 3-frame dissolves, you see. And at the end of it, I realized, wait a minute. Theoretically, you should be able to do 2-frame dissolves. And a lot of animations on 2s, you see. I mean, if they're, well, we don't want to get to that. But these 2-frame dissolves varnish the thing by about 1/3. So it covers a lot of bad work as well. And I do use that. I use everything. I still use that thing, and you'll see it in the prologue, but you will never know where it is, because I use it so it's invisible. See? And I thought, wonder when people are going to catch on to this. And then I finally saw an episode of The Simpsons when they're doing dissolves, because somebody'd seen my stuff. You know. They did it all wrong. It's much better without.
You also used it in A Christmas Carol, and I wanted to get to that because was that the first time that you worked? Well, you worked with Chuck Jones. He was your producer, right?
Yes.
What was that like?
Marvelous.
Yes.
He left me alone. he came in, he got me the job. It was for ABC television. The idea was to do, he gave me a choice of 5 classics or something. We won animated classics for a television half-hour special. He got me the top money for it, because they'd seen The Light Brigade, you see. He'd shown it to, and he said, I want you to do that cross-hatching. I said, we'll never make it. It's too much, you go mad. So I said, can I use pencil, just pencil drawings? And he agreed. Yeah. Anyway, he then said, I just want 2. I said, I'll take The Christmas Carol, because I'd never read it. And it's absolutely marvelous. And I mean, it's filmic. His descriptions of the ghosts are, it's a movie. So we had to crunch it into a fifth of the length of the book. And Chuck said, I want 2 things you have to do, that's all. I want to see the rooftops of London, and I want to hear jingle bells. And we did a big job on the roofs of London in a new way, and I managed to not do the jingle bells. But he was terrific, and when we were running out of gas, long story, but we were not going to make the deadline, and it was slated for a big deal, and I rang him up and said, look, I'm really scared of missing it. And he said, well, I've got 3 very good guys, my guys, who've finished some stuff. I'll send them in. So we got Chuck's crash team in for 6 weeks.
And who were they?
Abe Levito is a marvelous animator who should have been. He went out and studied, got excited by what we were doing, and he went and studied Tiepolo, and he was doing stuff in perspective and strong. Anyway, and a guy called George Nicholas, who was very good. Shorts animator, goofy animator, and then Hal Ambro was a very good animator, and they helped, and then we made it.
Wasn't it also
he was great.
You first worked with Ken Harris? Was he involved?
He was already with me.
He was already with you.
And because of Chuck, Chuck is a tremendous help to me.
Yeah. Some people consider Ken to be one of the greatest animators.
Me too.
I mean, you see Waikiki Wabbit, excuse me. You know, that dance he does, it's so fluid.
But he was a champion dancer.
Was he?
Ken.
Yeah.
And he also did One Froggy Morning. Or was it One Froggy Evening?
Yeah. And you did Pink Panther titles with him, and he dances in that too.
Yes,
right?
yeah. Ken could just handwrite. He did a thing with the thief when we were doing, this was before the Panther, and I said, I want the thief, I don't know if anybody's seen it, but he steals from himself, and he runs over, and he does a sort of little victory dance. So Ken said, do it again. I do it again. And he said, okay. And I said, I'll never be able to do this, you see. But I can now. That was Ken. You get a good picture of Ken now. And I cleaned all that up and did some of it, but he just hand wrote it, you know.
There's so much entertainment in just that little clip of the Pink Panther, the way he doesn't. Do you ever do anything easy?
Well, I always had I want to be able to just do it like a top actor or like a soliloquy or something. Yeah. Somebody just stands there and talks. And I'm doing right now a 20-second thing with a very funny woman. And it's, boy, I think it's the best thing I've ever done. But she's just sitting there talking. There's nothing else.
Why is she funny?
Oh, it's the gesture, pantomime, the way she does it. But that's the thing, I mean, if somebody does Alas, Poor Yorick, it's the way you do it, isn't it?
Right. You talked about some performers having a little extra movement that they have. Fred Astaire, Gwen Verdon, somebody, mostly dancers. Do you want to mention that?
Well, Art Babbitt, who we haven't
Not yet.
talked about, Who, do you,
You want to talk about it?
well, leads to the missing drawing or the extra drawing.
Okay.
He
Whatever you
taught
want
us.
to talk about, I want to listen.
I managed to get, Art Babbitt was a real character. And when I had Ken working there, then doing a commercial, I got the woman who was producing a New York commercial that we were doing, said, I'm doing a job with Art Babbitt. And I said, God, what's he doing commercials? And she said, well, he's doing our commercial for this, that, and the other.
You should tell him what he has done before.
Yeah, was, in the early days, he was the highest paid animator at Disney's. He virtually created Goofy. He did the Magic Mirror on the Wall, the Evil Queen. He did the Fantastic Mushroom Dance in Fantasia. And he also was the best guy at the UPA later with Revolution against Disney.
Yeah.
And he was old, and he hadn't been animating. So I said, could you ever come over to England? And he said, oh yeah. He said, I like your work. I see your work. He said, you're doing an honest job, but you don't really know what you're doing. And I said, will you please come for a month and teach us, show us what you do, how to do it. And he said, okay. So he took a leave of absence from Hanna-Barbera and came to London, and he gave, every day for 3 hours in the morning, he gave us the lectures. I wrote down every possible word I could, and that became a book which passed around the world with the secrets of animation. Yeah. And they were very crude, really, notes, but it was, you could imagine, it was like water in the desert. It was like, how do you do this, Nietzsche? How do you do that? How do you do this? And his thing was, one of the things, he taught articulation. Well, he went into acting and everything. He was wonderful. And we had to do tests. So the studio ground to a halt. We almost went broke because everybody's doing their tests. We're supposed to do it at night. Of course, they're doing it in the afternoon. And anyway, so we all started really learning. But there's a thing. I mean, if you go from here to here, say, you don't want to just go clunk like that. A dancer will go like that. So it's like Oriental dance, you know. Babbitt calls it breaking joints, that you lead with this. Is there anybody playing tennis? You're doing it all the time. So there's actually I got in terrible trouble with Ken Harris because I was always doing his in-betweens to learn. And when I learned this thing from Babbitt, you see, I'd put the hand in like this. And Ken said, what did you do that for? And I said, well, it's loosening it up. He said, just put in an in-between. I just won. So I learned when not to use it. So it's like you discover the color purple, and then you're putting it in every damn thing you do. So and that's the only way you learn.
When did you meet the great Disney animator that you
Milt.
Yeah.
Can I tell you my story about?
You can do anything you want.
I want to finish off with Ken.
Yeah, sorry.
Because we got on terribly well. You see, I met him when we met him. The hotel doors, the what do you call it? The elevator opened, and he's standing there with his wife, and I started laughing, and he said, "Yeah, I know. I look like a coyote." And Chuck had drawn him as the coyote, really. And but he didn't mind that. We got on terribly well. So we get in, and then I start to find out this guy is doing 3 times more work than we're doing. I mean, and he's coming in, like the English arrive, wander in at 10:30, 11, and get into overtime at night, slobber. He's in a bad temper, opens up the studio at 7:30, and he's finished by noon. And then he goes to lunch with the guys, and they talk about Hollywood or something. And then he goes home about 3 in the afternoon to watch TV, or the tennis, if he could. So I said, what's he, like, he had such a precise view of everything. I mean, he knew, he put these things in the right place all the time, just a knack. So I'd be doing about a drawing a second. He liked me as a director. He was very complimentary, in fact. And he liked my drawings a lot. But he'd say, it's a nice drawing, Dick, but you know, the bum's in the wrong place. So he'd cut it out, or he'd stick the head up with tape, or retrace the foot in a different place. And this went on for 4 or 5 years. Seriously. So he's always altering my drawings, but the animation's coming out like magic. And then finally one day he says to me, he says, hey, Dick, you're putting those things in the right, you're starting to put those things in the right place. So I said, yes, I'm like a sponge. And you know, and I'm getting it, aren't I? I can feel I'm getting it. Yeah. And he says, yeah. He says, yeah, you could be an animator. I'm 40 years old. I've got 100 awards and the thing that, you know. So I said, I have to go to the toilet. So I went out and sulked. About not that much further. And I said, these goddamn Hollywood animators, they're movement mechanics. And I'm an artist. So this went on for about 10 minutes until I said, and I'm a fraud. And I said, get back in there and start learning. You know, and I did. And then, you'll see the thing with zigzag that people like. I did a scene, and just a pencil test. I worked on it over a year, and I never mentioned it to Ken. And at the end of a year, I showed it to him on the moviola. I said, I'd like to see something I did. So he looks at it. He says, oh, all right, you're an animator. but about 2 years later, after a lot of work, he says to me one day, he says, hey, Dick, you could be a good animator. So now I'm 42, 43 or something. And it went on like that. And then when he, and it was learning to put the thing in the right place was the basic thing.
Right.
But when he got very old, he was 82, and he'd had bad angina since I got him at age 69. And anyway, I'd go out, he couldn't travel to London anymore. So when I was out there, I would go and lay out the drawings for 3 hours with him. And he would have a nap in the middle. And then one day he didn't get up. And he comes up and he says, oh, God, I'm so goddamn old. I'm sorry. I just, oh, God. Oh, you've animated the scene. And I said, what? I just kept going. I mean, what was I going to do? You know, I just, nice drawings. That's wrong. And I can't remember what it was. It's ego, whatever. But he was right, of course. And I said, God damn it, Ken. I said, Abe Levito said he couldn't get it from you. And he was your protege. And I said, I've had 14 years drinking your blood. and I'm never going to get it. And it's going to die with you. And you went, And then he comes in and he says, "You'll be all right now." And that was my graduation. Yeah, really. But then, this just kept happening to me all the way, because then I met Milt Kahl. And the whole story starts again. Because Ken had muttered, he said, "You know, there's this guy who's considered the world's greatest animator. I haven't met him," he said, "but he's at Disney, Milt Kahl." And we had done the light, I don't know about the timing of this, but we had done the Light Brigade, and the Jungle Book came out. And I didn't want to go to the Jungle Book because I was very Disney. And so I said, well, I had to go and see it. So I went to see the Jungle Book, and it opened, if you remember, there's a baby and the wolves, and it's very ordinary and pastel, you know, I can't think, prosaic? And then and I'm saying, oh God, no, that's just repeating themselves forever. And the boy Mowgli comes in on a panther, and he's doing this awful thing. Hello there, the sort of Hollywood thing. And he's on the panther, and I said, oh, I can't stand this stuff. And I'm about to get up, and then the boy gets off the panther, and a beautiful drawing of a East Indian boy is there. I said, what? And then he starts to go up the tree, and I said, you must know this sequence. And as he gets, and then the snake, and I said, oh, and even the color was terrific. And I thought, everything is suddenly completely transformed. And it kept going through the film. I kept seeing this one hand that I reckoned. I thought, that must be this guy, Milt Kahl. Mm-hmm. I was so shattered, because I'm starting to think I can animate. See, and I thought, this is just when that tiger came in, all 600, 800 pounds, and just walked, and it's an actor, the George Sanders, and it turned out it's also a drawing of Milt, self-portrait, and the tiger. And so I wrote a long letter, and I stayed up until about 4 in the morning, writing a fan letter to, "Dear Milt Kahl, I assume this is you know, I've heard about you, and I've seen, there are 10 things in this film that look to me to be this one person's hand. It looks, I'm guessing it's you." I turned out to be right about 9 of them. One was Ollie Johnson with the wonderful panther swivel on his hip as he walked away at the end. Anyway, so I said, because of the Disney hothouse training of the 30s and all, you know, the tremendous money and effort they spent to deal with this thing scientifically as well as artistically, to get it to that level, I said, and you're obviously the Yasha Hivitz of the thing, of the whole thing. I said, and I don't think no one will ever be able to do this again. And back came a letter, and he knew my work, and he was very polite about it, but it was very friendly. So letters went back and forth, you see, and he'd said that was the best letter they'd ever received. Later, I changed my mind that you couldn't learn. I kept thinking, wait a minute, if these guys know how to do it, if they will tell you, and if you look what I learned from Ken, there must be a way that a jerk like me can get it. See, so anyway, I met Milt, and I have to do, this is a true thing. Have I done this with you?
I'm not sure.
Well, he was his second wife. He'd married Disney's niece, who was an art dealer and crazy rich. And Milt didn't give a damn about money, but he liked her a lot. And it was, anyway, he came to do trout fishing. He was a tremendous trout fisherman. And anyway, in my studio, there was the front door was a Georgian building on Soho Square, a very beautiful old building. And there are big windows, big glass windows. And then we had a big, heavy glass partition. And he said, the thing says, well, Milt Call's here. So I went, and I see this big backlit shadow. He's about 6'2", and he's had rickets because he was a poor boy. They had, very poor. So this big shape comes in, you see. So I didn't know what to do, and I started shining his shoes. I have to do this. As he's walking, I'm shining, you see. And he has to walk past. There's a bunch of awards here. There's a boardroom there where we're going. And there are a bunch of very attractive women typing and things on the right. He's not looking. And he says, oh, don't. I said, no. And then he said, you don't have to shine my shoes. And then he said, what's that painting? And there's a great big thing of mine of figures. And I said, that's an old painting of mine. He said, well, you can stop shining because you draw better than me. And I said, oh, no. And then he says, on the other hand, keep shining because you can't animate worth shit. So, oh, don't worry. Thank you. I have no more use for it. Oh, thank you. But if you don't mind, it's a technical thing. I got this, he went into the boardroom and I said, how did you ever get that tiger to weigh so much and move like that? And he said, he gave me 2 sentences. Well, this is the first. He says, I know where the weight is on every drawing. I know where it's taking the weight and where the weight is just transferring over. On every drawing, I know where the weight is. And I said, and what do you do first? He said, oh, in a walk or a 4-legged animal or a 2-legged person, whatever, I do the contact. I'll do this in two-thirds. He said, not just on a side, even if it's coming towards you even, I do the contact. There's drawing 1. And then I'll do a rough down here, a contact back here. And he says, then I'll do the contact here, the contact here. And it's contacts before the weight goes on it. Just when there is before the foot goes down, just contact. Contact. He said, then with the walk, I've already got it planned out. And then I put in between, the median, the middle drawing, which is usually between going in a walk. You go up, and you say, here's your contact. You're sort of in the normal. You go up, and then it goes down on the next contact, and then you come up to a medium. And he said, that way it's simple. So that was tremendous.
Marvelous. We want to set up prologue. We're going to show you the whole film. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but then we're going to come back and have another little chat after that. Now, prologue was done only on one level. It's one single piece of paper,
yeah.
Right? So any of the things going into the distance and coming back, you had to animate that on each page.
Yes, it's all on one piece of paper, about that size.
Yeah.
It's back to 1900, except that I've got the knowledge, but it's just like J.R. Bray or whatever,
Yes, yeah.
you know, just, I can't stand the levels of animation, like the battles, you know, the thief. you think it's so technical, and I just want to see the whole thing on what, I don't want to depend on a damn cameraman or friends to help. I just want to see, there's somebody's head, and I'm going to move it over to there. And then I can see how I'm doing. And then I take a picture of it, you know, each drawing, and it feeds into...
You shoot it too? You shoot it too?
Yeah, well, there's nothing to shooting it with modern thing. The Aardman, where I rent space, and I'm friends with him, they're marvelous.
Aardman is a studio in
Aardman
Bristol
studio.
that he works at.
Wallace and Gromit, you know. And fortunately, we're good friends with them. And when I went there, I've been there about 8 years, and I'd go I'm very near the canteen, and I'd go in the canteen and people would say, "Oh, are you managing to keep busy, are you? You know, doing anything, filling in your time, are you?" Anyway, when they saw what I was doing with the prologue, it suddenly all changed. And now it's like, "How's it going? How's it going?" I said, like a snail, like a snail.
Would you use the computer on The Thief if you were doing it today? To do all that complicated war machine, etc.?
I have no idea, because I don't have a phone. I'm dependent on Mo, fortunately. I've got the most wonderful thing that I'm hiding from all the. I'm using it goes. My stuff goes into the Aardman. They have a brilliant guy in there who varnishes my stuff. They take all they bomb the fingerprints off the drawings, and we can grade it there and we can polish it. So it goes through the state-of-the-art stuff, camera, but I'm using 1900 technology.
Yeah.
We were running when we were running around with the DVDs. We went up all of California to the studios, and we were in one of these very technical studios, and it was a lot of, it wasn't the prologue, but it was stuff with animation lessons, kind of. And somebody said, what software system did you use? And I said, "Oh, it's the 3B system." And they all went, it was a very serious discussion. I said, "Piece of paper and a 3B pencil." That's it.
That's marvelous. Marvelous. It's
Horrible.
frightening as hell.
Well, I'm doing it. It's an anti-war play, ancient play, which is a farce. And I have to sneak. I felt I have to have something on the front showing this actual Peloponnesian War they had. And they just lost 45,000 men. And this guy wrote this crazy play where the women withhold sex to get the men to stop the war. You probably know it. They put it on anyway, I'm doing my take on it. So I have to get, I think it's working, where I have to get from this horrible stuff to, I've done it with a sexy scene, with a woman reading the titles, and she's just like a super Jessica Rabbit, but realistic, which is even more so. So, and then it slides into sort of lyric, and then it starts going funny. And so I think it's going to work. So the genre changes 3 times.
Do you have someone helping you, an assistant? Do you do all the in-betweens?
Yep.
Wow.
There isn't anybody. There's one wonderful assistant. But for years, she worked mostly with my best guy, Russell Hall. And then for some reason, he took a year off. And I got her. She was fantastic. So she helped me with the butterfly. She did some of the rendering, but she'd be marvelous. But we mailed stuff. It doesn't work. You have to have the person right there and say, look, can you just handle this while I handle that, you know? And there isn't anybody I know.
Richard, what's a
can do it.
typical day like for you in Bristol?
Well, we get up in the morning and we go swimming. And
Are you, how early? Are you a morning person? Is that where you?
well, we go. Most of the fanatics are in the pool. We come towards the end. Depends how much. I like to swim a kilometer. I used to be a swimmer, so I love swimming. And we both go and swim at least half a mile. And then we sometimes go for breakfast at a place. And then I take the bus to the center of Bristol. And then I walk for another 20 minutes or something. And they have a marvelous little ferry that takes a minute to go across the river. And then Ardman is on that side. So I go there and I put in at least 7 hours a day.
Do you have your own office?
Yeah, marvelous office. There's a banana. They call it the Banana Building. It's where where they started Ardman, and all the bananas used to come from Jamaica, and they'd store them there for distribution to the country. And so they've turned into a big studio set. What do you call it? Stage. 2 big stages, and some offices. And I'm in a wonderful corner office. And you know how people always talk about getting into the zone? Well, I've got a stair. I can go up the fire escape, just 1 floor to my room. I open the door, and I'm in the zone by the time I put my foot in, because I know nobody's going to call me unless it's Mo, and nobody's going to walk in. I don't have to say hello to anybody. You know, I'm free. And provided I don't turn the radio on, I'm going to do my best work.
So you work in silence, or do you use music at all?
No, you know the story with Mill in my book.
Tell it.
Well, sometimes I use music, but I can't work and listen to it. It's just like a drone, like in a restaurant. I have the World Service on when I'm doing in-betweens.
Do you
Boring.
ever get discouraged?
No, because I can truly say, you can see I'm doing new stuff. And the stuff I'm doing now doesn't look like that. And I've got the...
What do you mean it doesn't look like that? What's it like?
Well, I've got... you know how in animation the worst thing is the female character, the realistic woman. Well, I've got a really realistic woman. And it certainly works as well as that. And I'm doing a conversation between 2 women. One's very kind of cartoony, and the other one is serious idealist. And I'm fine. I'm going to keep this one secret.
All right.
But I have discovered a new way of cutting. You know how you always see it on soap operas, over the shoulder, somebody's talking, and then you cut to the other angle, and then you back and forth. And I hate it. And I mean, cuts are a visual drum beat. That's why I don't have any. I want it to just flow. And I found a new way of cutting. These 2 people are talking. And I found a new way of cutting, which no one in 100 years of cinema have figured out.
And
see, I'm not going to tell you. It works because it's completely illogical.
do you use a storyboard?
Only when pushed. I make little notes. I don't do thumbnails. I mean, I might do a thumbnail storyboard.
Do you work really rough first?
Yeah. Yes, I do big drawings, crude. I'm terrible big drawings. And sometimes I'll just stand up to do them, or I'd use a blunt end of something, or I'm trying to, it's the old thing, get it in the right place, Dick, and you can do your fancy drawing after. So I do rough, very rough. And then I try to rub them down and start to clean it up.
Do you test everything, all the different roughs and then the cleaner ones and then?
No.
No?
I can do, but except I can't run I'm so hopeless with the machine. I have to call for help all the time. But I'll test something if I'm not too worried, if I'm worried about it. Well, I want to see what I'm doing. I think I know what I've got. But I can tell you, this sounds terribly egotistical, but when I'll do a chunk and I'll test it. And I hear this voice say, yes! And it's me. And it happens, it never used to happen. It was always, you know. Now I can't even help. There's a sort of grunt of pleasure because I seem to hit it on the nail now. But that's because I paid attention to those men that I'm crawling on their bodies. You know.
What one word would you use to describe yourself?
He pulled this one on me 9 years ago.
It's the Baba Wawa section of this.
I knew he was going to do something. I thought it would be a different one, but I said it in the thing.
Why tamper with failure?
Artistically greedy. Now, I just wish to hell that I wasn't so old, and that this had all happened earlier. But then being realistic, it wouldn't have happened earlier. You know, and I'm so lucky to have known Babbitt and Ken and Art and Frank Thomas had a big... Shall I tell you, have we got time for a funny story about Frank Thomas?
Always.
When we started the Rabbit, animation was in the doldrums. And I was always very friendly with Frank and him with me. I mean, he always criticized me. He criticized me for doing the spectacular and not doing the emotional cuddling up, which he specializes in. And but he wrote me a wonderful letter when I was starting the Rabbit, and I had a big coat, and I kept this letter in the coat because he said, in the letter, he said, if you pull this off, you're going to be a hero, you see. So every time when the politics got really heavy, I'd reach into the big coat and pull out Frank's letter and say, if I pulled it, you know, and anyway, then so I used it for 2 years. And then the picture came out and it was this major hit. And nothing from Frank, you see. 3 months went by, nothing from Frank. So I rung him up and I said, Frank, it's Dick. And he says, yes. And I said, well, we did it, Frank. I mean, the picture's a hit. I said, oh, come on, Frank. I mean, I know it's, you know, it's kind of I guess it's a sort of gimmick raised to the level of a novelty. And he says, And he said, I said, come on, Frank, you're always at me of not getting to the people's emotions strongly enough. I said, if you look in the Rabbit, when they're going to dip the rabbit in the acid, all the kids in the audiences say, don't do it, don't do it. And Frank says, I wish they had.
Wow.
I think that Milt was dead by then. I think he probably would have, he'd say, yeah, crude Warner Brothers stuff, that Chuck Jones stuff, yeah, okay, Dick.
Richard, we just have to wind it up, unfortunately, but what do you have for young animators?
Easy. Persist. Keep going. Don't get stopped. You know, because they're going to stop you if they can. I mean, I've found, I had in education, I have no education, but on paper. Persistent. If I ever did, you know, the I Ching they do, when it always came out for me, it says persistence furthers. And I really think, just keep studying, keep going. You know.
What advice would you have for old animators? The same thing.
Same thing.
Learn to draw. Well, Richard, I just want to say what a great pleasure this has been, and what a great thing you've given to the world. You've entertained us, you've mesmerized us, you've amazed us with your work through the years, and I just feel very privileged to have known you and to have enjoyed your company all this time, and I just want to thank you. Thank you very much.
He's been marvelous to me, and he just got me special paper that I need.
Enough about it. Richard!
Thank you. Oh, good Lord. Thank you. Oh, come on. This is crazy. Thanks very much.